In 272 CE, when the Roman legions decisively crushed Queen Zenobia's army just outside Antioch, her high-ranking generals braced themselves for the inevitable execution. But what unfolded before their very eyes was something far more calculated, a fate perhaps even more chilling than a swift death. Rome, with its centuries of imperial experience, had honed the art of subduing rulers without resorting to outright killing. Instead, they transformed defiant monarchs into enduring, breathing testaments to the sheer, overwhelming power of the Roman Empire. For women who wore crowns, defeat signified a unique brand of brutality, a systematic erasure of dignity that went far beyond mere punishment. Roman law, or rather the absence of it, afforded queens absolutely no legal protection whatsoever. Under the iron fist of Roman jurisprudence, war captives were relegated to a legal limbo, stripped bare of every single safeguard typically extended to citizens. The principle of ius gentium, the law of nations, dictated that military defeat instantly converted free men and women into mere property. Once a city crumbled or an army surrendered on the battlefield, its inhabitants, regardless of their former social standing, instantly became enslaved under Roman law. A queen, in this merciless framework, possessed no more legal recourse than the lowliest, most insignificant soldier in her vanquished army. This legal vacuum painted a terrifying picture. Roman citizens enjoyed inherent rights that shielded them from certain abuses. To publicly flog a Roman citizen was considered a scandalous act. To execute one without the pretense of a trial would ignite widespread outrage and condemnation. However, foreign captives, regardless of their royal lineage or noble blood, were granted no such protections. They could be mistreated with impunity, paraded as objects of conquest, sold off into slavery, or summarily executed based solely on the whims of their captors. Roman law offered no exceptions for gender, no deference to noble birth. The 12 Tables, Rome's foundational legal code dating back to the 5th century BCE, established these grim principles with ruthless clarity. Prisoners seized in war became the property of the Roman state, or were divvied up amongst the victorious soldiers as spoils. Women born into royal families soon discovered the bitter truth. Their former power and influence counted for absolutely nothing once chains had replaced their crowns. The historian Tacitus, known for his unflinching observations of Roman society, vividly documented this harsh legal reality in his accounts of defeated British royalty. He noted with chilling detachment that Roman officials displayed absolutely no hesitation in violating the bodies and spirits of those who had once commanded armies and dispensed justice. Female captives, in particular, faced additional layers of vulnerability. Roman military culture, forged in the crucible of centuries of relentless conquest, openly regarded captured women as prizes of war. While some elite prisoners might be kept in relative comfort, awaiting a potential ransom or strategic political negotiations, the vast majority faced immediate and brutal degradation. The line separating prisoner of war from slave existed solely on paper. In practice, defeat utterly dissolved all former status, leaving captive queens susceptible to treatment so dehumanizing it would have been utterly unthinkable had they been blessed with the protections of Roman citizenship. One of the most brutal manifestations of this policy was the public display of royal prisoners in Roman triumphs. The Roman triumph was far more than just a military parade. It was a meticulously orchestrated public spectacle designed to transform military victory into a potent demonstration of imperial dominance. Captive royalty formed the very centerpiece of these elaborate processions. When a general earned the Senate's coveted permission to celebrate a triumph, elaborate preparations commenced for a display that would flaunt Rome's absolute power through its streets for all the world to see. The designated route snaked from the Campus Martius through the bustling Roman Forum and ultimately up the Capitoline Hill, encompassing nearly 4 kilometers of densely packed, cheering crowds. These processions adhered to a carefully choreographed order designed to maximize psychological impact. Musicians and entertainers led the way, their joyous music soon followed by carts laden with paintings, sculptures, and meticulously crafted models depicting conquered cities and far-off lands. Wild animals, captured from exotic territories, were paraded in chains, offering the Roman populace a tantalizing glimpse into the mysterious, unknown world that their legions had so ruthlessly subdued. Then came the prisoners of war, walking in shackles, forming the very heart of the spectacle. Captured rulers were forced to march at the very front of the prisoner column, their royal garments often deliberately left intact, a stark contrast meant to emphasize the sheer magnitude of their fall from grace. Queens who had once commanded armies and ruled over vast empires were now forced to shuffle in chains before jeering crowds who openly celebrated their utter humiliation. The contrast was entirely deliberate. By displaying monarchs in their full royal attire, yet bound and utterly powerless, Rome communicated a chilling message that reverberated far beyond the city walls. No kingdom stood beyond Rome's reach. No throne could guarantee safety or security. The triumphal procession served multiple purposes far beyond mere celebration. It served as a visceral demonstration of Roman military might, meant to intimidate potential allies and strike terror into the hearts of enemies. It also sated the bloodlust of the Roman citizenry, who craved tangible, visible proof of their military victories. Crucially, it provided a grand stage for the systematic degradation of those who had dared to resist Roman expansion. For female captives of royal blood, the triumph meant enduring the merciless gaze of thousands of eyes while being utterly stripped bare of all dignity. The journey typically lasted an entire day, the procession deliberately moving at a snail's pace to allow spectators lining the route to drink in every excruciating detail. Captive queens were forced to walk this agonizing gauntlet, knowing that their fate hung precariously in the balance. Some would survive the day, their lives spared for strategic or political reasons. Others would never see the sunset. The agonizing uncertainty itself served as a form of torture, forcing the defeated to contemplate their impending doom with every step they took through the streets teeming with celebrating Romans. Zenobia herself was forced to march through Rome in chains of solid gold. Queen Zenobia of Palmyra had carved out a formidable empire that stretched from Egypt to Anatolia, openly challenging Roman authority across the eastern territories. When Emperor Aurelian finally crushed her forces in 272 CE and captured the queen as she attempted to flee towards Persia, he gained far more than just a military victory. He acquired the perfect symbol for his upcoming triumph, a living testament to Roman power. The Historia Augusta, a collection of imperial biographies penned in the 4th century, provides detailed, often sensationalized, descriptions of Zenobia's appearance in Aurelian's triumphal procession of 274 CE. This account, likely drawing from eyewitness testimony and popular rumors, paints a picture of a spectacle designed to overwhelm observers with its opulence and sheer cruelty. Zenobia was adorned with a dazzling array of jewels that caught the sunlight, transforming her into a glittering monument to Rome's dominion over the wealthiest kingdoms of the East. But it was the chains that drew the most attention, becoming a lasting symbol of Roman dominance. These were not merely simple iron shackles meant for restraint. Zenobia walked bound in heavy golden chains, so massive that guards marched alongside her, their sole purpose being to help bear the immense weight. The choice of gold was entirely deliberate. These chains symbolized the very wealth she had commanded as queen, now twisted into the instrument of her bondage. Her entire person had become a walking, breathing display of conquered riches. Ancient sources recount that Zenobia maintained remarkable composure throughout the ordeal. Despite the crushing weight of the golden chains and the hours of slow marching through hostile, jeering crowds, she carried herself with a regal dignity that impressed many observers. This very defiance may have ultimately saved her life. Aurelian, perhaps impressed by her unwavering bearing, or calculating that her continued existence served his purposes better than her death, spared Zenobia the execution that awaited most captive rulers. Instead, the emperor granted her a villa near Rome, where she lived out her remaining years in relative comfort. Some accounts even claim she married a Roman senator and became integrated into aristocratic society, her daughters marrying into noble families. Whether this represented an act of mercy or simply a more subtle, insidious form of humiliation remains a subject of historical debate. Zenobia spent her final decades as a living reminder of Rome's absolute power, her mere presence in Italian society, a constant demonstration that even the mightiest of queens could be reduced to a state of Roman dependence. The story of Boudica and her daughters offers an even more brutal glimpse into the realities of Roman conquest. In 60 CE, when King Prasutagus of the Iceni died, he left a will specifically designed to protect his kingdom and ensure the safety of his family. He bequeathed half of his territory to Emperor Nero and the remaining half to his two daughters, hoping that this compromise would preserve some semblance of independence while simultaneously satisfying Roman demands. The strategy backfired catastrophically. Roman officials, led by the notoriously corrupt imperial procurator Catus Decianus, utterly ignored the will. They seized all Iceni lands and property, declaring the entire kingdom forfeit to Rome. When Queen Boudica bravely protested this flagrant violation of the agreement, she faced a punishment that starkly demonstrated just how little protection royal status afforded defeated rulers. Tacitus, whose father-in-law, Agricola, served in Britain during this tumultuous period, recorded the events that followed with unusual directness, a rare quality for ancient historians discussing such sensitive matters. Boudica was publicly subjected to brutal corporal punishment. The flogging alone represented a profound violation. To beat a Roman citizen required legal justification and adherence to strict procedural safeguards. To flog a queen of an allied kingdom in broad daylight constituted an act of deliberate and calculated humiliation. But the Romans went even further, descending into depths of depravity. Boudica's daughters, likely teenagers and certainly unmarried, were brutally violated by Roman soldiers. Tacitus describes these horrific assaults with sparse language, yet the underlying horror is palpable, conveying his own revulsion at events that violated even Roman sensibilities regarding acceptable conduct. The historian pointedly notes that Boudica was flogged and her daughters violated, placing these heinous crimes at the very center of his explanation for the rebellion that swiftly followed. The abuse was not random violence, but a carefully calculated act of degradation designed to break the spirit of the royal family and indelibly demonstrate Roman dominance over the Iceni. The public nature of these crimes amplified their impact exponentially. This was not violence committed in secret, hidden from view. It was humiliation performed in front of the entire Iceni people. By abusing the royal family in full view of their subjects, Roman officials sent a chilling message about the fate that awaited those who dared to question imperial authority. The physical abuse and the brutal violation of Boudica and her daughters were deliberately intended to terrorize an entire population into submission. The strategy backfired spectacularly. Rather than crushing resistance, the abuse of the royal family ignited a ferocious rebellion that nearly drove Rome from Britain entirely. Boudica raised an army that destroyed 3 Roman cities, including Londinium, massacring tens of thousands of Roman citizens and their allies. Tacitus preserves a powerful speech that he attributes to Boudica, in which she declares that she fights not as a queen seeking to preserve her kingdom, but as a woman avenging her abused body and the violated honor of her daughters. The rebellion ultimately ended in defeat on an unknown battlefield, where Roman discipline and superior tactical positioning overcame the far larger British forces. Tacitus claims that Boudica poisoned herself rather than face capture and further humiliation. The fate of her daughters, however, remains unrecorded. They vanish from historical accounts after the initial violation, their stories lost to silence. The threat of execution after triumphs eventually ended, though the chilling spectacle remained. As triumphal processions snaked their way through Rome towards the Capitoline Hill, captive rulers understood that their journey might well end at the Mamertine prison. Known in Latin as the Tullianum, this ancient structure, built into the northeastern slope of the Capitoline, served as the final destination for Rome's most notorious enemies. While the triumph itself continued to the Temple of Jupiter, where the victorious general would make offerings to the gods, condemned prisoners were led aside to face their execution. The Tullianum consisted of 2 levels. The upper chamber served as a holding cell, while the lower dungeon, accessible only through a hole in the ceiling, became the execution chamber. Here, in darkness and filth, Rome's enemies met their end. The methods of execution varied. Some were executed by suffocation, others were simply left to starve to death in the pitch-black darkness. The process was deliberately hidden from public view, occurring while crowds cheered and celebrated on the streets above. Vercingetorix, the Gallic chieftain who had unified the tribes of Gaul against Julius Caesar, exemplified this grim fate. After his crushing defeat at Alesia in 52 BCE, Caesar held him in prison for 6 long years before finally parading him through Rome in his triumph of 46 BCE. The once vigorous and commanding Gallic leader had deteriorated significantly during his captivity, appearing as a broken figure before the Roman crowds. Immediately after the procession, he was led to the Tullianum and executed. Jugurtha, the king of Numidia, met a similarly brutal end following Marius's triumph in 104 BCE. According to ancient accounts, when he was lowered into the Tullianum's lower chamber, the king was driven mad with terror. He was left to starve to death over 6 agonizing days, his cries echoing through the cold stone walls while Rome celebrated above. The historian Plutarch recorded his final words, reportedly asking in delirium, "How cold this Roman bath is." Simon Barora, a leader of the Jewish revolt that ended with the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE, was displayed in Titus's triumph before being executed at the traditional site in the Roman Forum. Josephus documented how the triumphal procession paused at the Temple of Jupiter, while messengers awaited confirmation that the execution had been carried out. Only after receiving official confirmation of the enemy leader's death did the ceremonies conclude. Not every captive ruler faced immediate execution. The decision rested with the triumphant general, and, increasingly, under the empire, with the emperor himself. Some prisoners proved to be more valuable alive, serving as permanent symbols of Roman victory or as bargaining chips in future negotiations. But for those marked for death, the triumph offered only a fleeting, temporary reprieve before the descent into the Tullianum's darkness. The treatment of captured queens by Roman soldiers reveals the stark realities of how power operated in the ancient world. Legal systems that protected citizens evaporated at the boundary of conquest. Dignity afforded to nobility dissolved in defeat. These well-documented cases from Tacitus, Cassius Dio, and other ancient historians force us to confront the deliberate cruelty embedded in Roman conquest. The flogging of Boudica, the golden chains on Zenobia, and the executions that followed triumphs were not mere aberrations, but carefully calculated policies designed to break resistance and visibly display Roman power. Take a moment to consider how the systematic humiliation of defeated royalty shaped the fears that kept Rome's enemies compliant for centuries. The stone walls of the Mamertine prison still stand in Rome today, a stark reminder that the triumphs celebrated in ancient texts were built upon immense human suffering. Queens who had once commanded armies and administered justice found themselves reduced to mere spectacles. Their degradation was transformed into entertainment for cheering crowds who never considered the true cost of empire, a cost written in broken lives and stolen dignity. History often glorifies empires, victories, and conquerors, but rarely asks us to sit with the human cost left behind. If stories like these matter to you, if you believe history should be examined honestly rather than sanitized, then make sure you stay with this channel. Subscribe for more deeply researched explorations into the darker truths of the ancient world, where power, cruelty, and human resilience collide. And if this story made you reflect, share it because forgotten history has a way of repeating itself.